Well, good morning, everyone. Great to be with you. I'm John O'Neill, one of the pastors here at Grace, along with Pastor Chad Johnson, and just delighted to bring you the message for today. I love the gospel lesson, but I wanted to talk about the lesson from Jeremiah this morning because I love that passage about being chosen, about before you were born, I chose you. I think that's such a powerful passage. And besides that, I don't want to get thrown off a cliff in case you don't like the sermon for today. All right. So, have you ever noticed that there is a fine line between pain and laughter? It's kind of a fine line there. Sometimes we laugh at a joke because we can breathe a sigh of relief that it happened to someone else and not to us, right? Ever have that ever happened to you? All right. So I read a story about a born loser, and I doubt that the story is really true. Strange things do happen, however. And this is an old one, and you've heard it before, but give me a courtesy laugh anyway, okay? I just want to prepare you for that. Okay, so a young man knocked on the door of an expensive home, and he was looking for odd jobs to earn a little money. And the owner suggested that he paint the porch using the green paint in the garage. Well, a few hours later, the young man, covered with green paint nearly from head to toe, he comes out to get his pay. And as he pockets the $50, he says to the guy, "By the way, sir, that's not a porch, it's a Ferrari." You did get it, right? Okay. I just making sure. People at the first service, I don't think they got it at all. They were just like, wow. They needed a whole lot more coffee, that's for sure. And you're thinking, yeah, I can see that happening, and it would probably happen to me, right? Just seeing that one, okay. In Sweden, there's a saying. I like this saying. It's a wonderful saying. It says, "In every man there is a king, and in every woman there is a queen. If you speak to them as Your Majesty, the majesty will come forth." This morning, we want to deal with the majesty and the misery of being human, okay? Many of us are way more familiar with the misery, unfortunately, than we are with the majesty. We seem to be particularly conscious of life's misery when we are younger. There's a story about a young German boy who was kind of slow in school, and this really bothered him. It just bothered him. He was also distressed by his appearance. Now, this is not unusual because a lot of young people are worried about such things. And sometimes an offhand remark by another can really be a crushing blow for us, right? Well, this particular young guy had terribly unruly hair, just crazy hair. And one day, a peasant girl who was employed in his parents' home spoke to him about his hair. She said, "Hair shows a person's character," she said kind of sarcastically. "Yours is the worst I've ever seen." Well, the young guy was nearly devastated. One day, though, while visiting his grandmother, he saw a great artist's picture of the Apostle John, of St. John. And John had unruly hair. And so the boy thought to himself, well, he was a saint, and yet he had unruly hair. I can't be all that bad. Maybe God can use me in some way. Well, by the time that boy was 30 years old, he was a concert pianist, an eminent scholar, and a college president. And then later, he would leave it all behind to become the 20th century's most famous missionary to Africa. His name was Albert Schweitzer. Misery, majesty. Some of you can remember the misery of youth. Charles Blair, in his book, The Man Who Could Do Nothing Wrong, tells of his childhood growing up in the Depression. His family was poorer than most, and Charles's daily task was to haul from the firehouse a pail of free government milk issued for his family. He sensed the scorn of other boys as he passed them by on the street, as he carried his free milk, the symbol of his poverty. Deep in his heart, he made a vow that one day he would escape his poverty and his sense of worthlessness and never again carry a pail of milk. He also tells of walking home one day after school with a girl for whom he had developed some strong feelings. And suddenly, beside them sat another boy from their school on a shiny new bicycle. The boy on the shiny new bike offered the girl a ride home, and immediately she hopped on the back fender and rode off, leaving Charles humiliated. Within his heart, he made another vow. There would come a day when nobody could humiliate him like that again. He would have the equivalent of a shiny new bicycle, and he would use his status to demand respect. Well, Charles Blair went on to be a successful pastor and father and member of his community. But he never quite left behind that disappointed and humiliated little child of poverty he had once been. In his heart, that child was still there. For years, he strived to prove to the world that he was somebody, that he had escaped poverty, that worthlessness, the humiliation, the powerlessness of his youth. Now, I suspect that many of us have a little child from our youth who follows us around and says to us, "You have unruly hair. You're too fat. You're too short. You're too dumb. You're nobody. You'll never amount to anything." The misery of being human. The awful agony of rejection. Is there any hurt more devastating than that one? Some of us find ourselves crippled for a lifetime by our inability to accept ourselves as we really are. We go to extremes to avoid having people dislike us. Any small word of criticism is taken as a personal affront. And we isolate and we insulate ourselves emotionally from others. We dare not let anyone penetrate the facade that we have constructed. They might discover that we are in fact human, warts and all. Tom Hopkins, in his book, How to Master the Art of Selling, uses a really unusual analogy. It's the analogy of a torpedo on a submarine. You got to use your imagination with me here for a moment. We're on a nuclear submarine, and aboard the submarine are torpedoes. Now, these torpedoes are very sophisticated weapons. Inside each one are sensors and computers that allow the torpedoes to find their target. They do that by using feedback information. The torpedoes find their target and zero in on it. If the target seeks to evade the torpedo, electronic devices inform the torpedo to alter its course. The feedback goes something like this: off course, adjust your direction by 7 degrees west. Now, within milliseconds, the torpedo realigns itself and soon kisses its target goodbye. The torpedo uses negative messages from the electronic devices telling it that it is wrong and needs to adjust itself. Once upon a time, however, there was a torpedo that had been programmed with the idea that it is terrible to ever be wrong. Any self-respecting torpedo would never be off course, right? The thinking of this torpedo went like this: to be corrected means I am no good as a torpedo, that I can't do anything right. This means I'm a complete failure. It means the other torpedoes will laugh at me. This rejection-sensitive torpedo took the messages from the electronic devices as rejection of itself. Then came the day when it was sent out into the world. A target was sighted, and this torpedo was thrust out into the water. Immediately, the electronic devices sent a message: off course, you need to turn 13 degrees northwest. Off course? Again? The sensitive torpedo asked itself. I never do anything right. I'm a complete failure. I can't stand this tension. Why do they always pick on me? This is terrible. I'm going home. Inside the submarine, a sailor rubs his eyes. Captain, we have a problem. A strange thing's happening. I believe the torpedo is turning around. Oh, no. You get the picture, right? This is what life does to some of us. Even worse, that's what some of us do to ourselves, and we are miserable. Some of us are even self-destructive. Some of us are forever hindered from being what God created us to be, the misery of being human. But there's good news. There's good news, and there's hope. It's contained in the words that God spoke to Jeremiah when he first called him to be a prophet. Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I chose you. I appointed you to be a prophet to the nations." One biblical scholar described the world situation in 640 BC, the decline of Assyria and the rise of new military and political forces. And then he imagined that he was God looking over this troubled world. "What can I do about all this?" God asks. "I know. I'll make Jeremiah. I'll make Jeremiah." God says to Jeremiah, "Before you were born, I chose you." What an awesome statement. Awesome in its philosophical and theological and even moral implications, but also awesome in its implications for our daily lives. Here you see the misery is transformed into majesty. "Before you were born, I knew you." Some of us remember the name Leon Spinks. In the cruel world of professional boxing, Spinks was once the world heavyweight champion. And sometime back, Spinks was quoted as saying this: "People were always asking after I won the title, 'Who is Leon Spinks?' And then he added, 'It's a question I've been asking all my life. I didn't know who I was, but I knew I wanted to be somebody. I was tired of being nobody.'" I wonder if anyone ever told Leon Spinks that even before he was born, the eternal God chose him, and he was somebody. You see, that's the good news for the day. We matter. We are worth something. Let no one say that we are nobodies. This beautiful garden world was created for us. The infinite stars would not shine down from the skies if we were not here to behold them and to appreciate them. Of even more staggering importance is that a cross stands on a hill named Calvary. And it was there that the Son of the living God gave his life for you and me. One of the most important names of the 20th century was that of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. At one time, Solzhenitsyn was a prisoner in a Soviet labor camp. Like other prisoners, Solzhenitsyn worked in the fields. His days a pattern of back-breaking labor and slow starvation. One day the hopelessness became too much for him to bear. He felt no purpose in fighting on. His life would make no ultimate difference. Laying his shovel down, he walked slowly to a crude worksite bench. He knew at any moment a guard would order him up, and when he failed to respond, that guard would bludgeon him to death, probably with his own shovel. He'd seen it happen many times. As he sat waiting, head down, he felt a presence. And slowly he lifted his eyes, and next to him sat an old man with a wrinkled, utterly expressionless face. Hunched over, the man drew a stick through the sand at Solzhenitsyn's feet, deliberately tracing out the sign of the cross. As Solzhenitsyn stared at that rough outline, his entire perspective changed. He knew he was merely one man against the all-powerful Soviet Empire. Yet at that moment, he also knew that the hope of all humankind was represented by that simple cross, and through its power, anything was possible. Solzhenitsyn slowly got up, picked up his shovel, and went back to work, not knowing that his writings on truth and freedom would one day inflame the entire world. Such is the power of the cross. Such is the power of one person can have when he or she realizes that his or her life does matter. Before you were born, I chose you. There is no greater blasphemy for you or me to say that we are nobody. Our choice is between misery and majesty. If we are alone in this world, then it's misery. But if there is a loving God who chose us even before we were born, then it's majesty. Now, I don't know about you, but I choose the latter. I choose the majesty. And if Jesse Jackson were here, he'd lead us in a chant this morning. I am somebody, I am somebody, I am somebody. Well, we are somebody. Not because of anything we have done, but because the eternal God created us in his own image and gave us his Son, Jesus Christ, to die for us. And that makes us somebody. Thanks for watching. I hope this video can further the discussion of your relationship with Christ, either at home or maybe in the comments below.